a channel that brings you original behind-the-scenes conversations for the banking and fintech industries.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to today's podcast. I'm Brian Love, head of banking and fintech at Travillian. So excited to have the guests on today that you'll see here on the screen. We're joined by part of the brain trust of MidWestOne Bank out of Iowa City, Iowa. We have Chip Reeves, the Chief Executive Officer, and Paul Ho-Sing-Loy, the Chief Information Officer. Hello, Chip. Hello, Paul.
Hello.
Hey, Brian. Great to be with you today.
Yes, awesome to have you guys on the podcast. And Chip, we've known each other for a long time, so it's the first time we've ever done one of these. Let's make it a good one, okay?
Just don't tell any of the old stories, Brian.
No.
And congratulations to your Philadelphia Eagles on the Super Bowl win.
Thank you so much, Chip. I appreciate it. Also joining us today is my colleague here at Travillian, Patrick Cooney. How are you, Patrick?
I am doing well. Thank you, Brian. It's great to have some time with you, along with Chip and Paul. Excited for the session today.
Awesome. And the whole impetus of this program was Travillian was the partner of MidWestOne that brought Paul to MidWestOne from New Jersey to Iowa. And I thought the industry as a whole would like to maybe hear about this story a little bit. It's more than just recruitment. It's really a, somewhat traditional community bank, M&A strategy, organic strategy that really is trying to push and adopt technology to the best of their ability, and how community banks everywhere are really trying to figure that riddle out of how to work with technology as it bleeds into almost every fiber of an institution. So I wanted to maybe start here by getting a little bit of introduction to your bank. So Chip, MidWestOne has a strong reputation, as I said, as more of a traditional bank. So tell us a little bit about the bank, and then also what initially drove your need to evolve your tech strategy.
Yeah, sure thing, Brian. And first of all, I always get the question as we go around the country of Iowa City, is that where, the Hawkeyes are? Now, after a couple of years of Caitlin Clark becoming as famous as she is, I just essentially say it's the home of Caitlin Clark, and everybody now goes, oh, okay, I know Iowa City. So we're about $6.5 billion in size, Brian. We operate in 4 states. Iowa, the Twin Cities, Minneapolis, St. Paul, Marketplace in Minnesota, Wisconsin, and then also in Denver, Colorado. And when I joined the organization in November of 2022, we really embarked on a evolution that started to become a transformation of the organization. And MidWestOne has a great core deposit franchise, and it's kind of bedrock of our organization. And at the same time, we grew from $1.5 billion to $6.5 billion relatively quickly. Yet some of the our departments, processes, et cetera, didn't necessarily mature at the same pace as our asset size. And so as I joined the organization, we spent a lot of time in terms of truly figuring out who we are, who we aspire to be, what target segments are we most interested in, where can we win in this new framework of the banking landscape, technology driving a huge component of such. And so over the last couple of years, we've been able to truly transform the organization, of which our executive team and then our technology strategy has been a large component as well, which led us to Travillian and then led us to Paul Ho-Sing-Loy joining the organization this past summer.
Yeah, well, I appreciate that background, and it's been a fun bank to watch these last few years and its growth into, as you mentioned, Colorado, Minneapolis, and global domination coming next, I guess. But I guess so. Talking about Paul, let me ask you, Paul, quick question, maybe before you even introduce yourself. What is the difference between a CIO and a CTO and a head of IT?
So from my point of view, there's a difference in focus area.
The head of IT is operationally focused, make sure things keep running. The CTO is technology focused and is looking for the best technology out there. And the CIO is business focused. How can the technology be put in place to improve our business outcomes? Hope that answers your question.
Yeah, it does. And so then tell us, out of those three categories, who are you? And then tell us a little bit more about, and we'll get into it later in the discussion, but tell us a little bit more about your background and maybe, the excitement factor of joining MidWestOne.
Sure. So I've been at big banks, small banks, credit unions. Started out with Citibank, went to B of A, Wells Fargo. Ended up before coming here at a bank in New Jersey, Lakeland Bank, and we were about 11 billion when we actually were acquired by Provident Bank. The different size banks have different problems, but traditional banks in general have basically the same kinds of things that they've got to look at. So it's really been interesting. And I've been excited about coming to MidWestOne because I feel I've got the experience that they need to make a difference.
Yeah. And I know that there were some really great parallels between your career and what the bank wanted. Like I said, we'll get into that. We'll bring Patrick into that. But I wanted to ask Chip and Paul, from your perspectives, what are some of the biggest challenges that banks are facing when it comes to technology and also digital and technological transformation?
You want me to start that, Chip?
Yeah, why don't you go ahead and start, Paul?
Paul, you go first.
All right. So first of all, I think skill sets. As you grow, you need different types of people because you've got different kinds of technology, et cetera. You got to make sure that you have the right people and the right training to make sure that they have really, and critically important, is the fact that you have to make sure that you give your people an opportunity to grow into the things that they're going to be working on. Then you've got dependency on third parties. All the smaller community banks really have to look at, like a Fiserv or an FIS and other technology supporters, making sure that we're on the same page and that we potentially have less dependency on them going forward. Then again, you've got legacy systems. You got to do a lot of manual work to integrate the work that has to be done on those systems. You've got external competition, not just banks, but non-banks that are really coming into this area and competing in a big way now. And then, of course, you've got the new technologies, AI being one of the biggest ones. It's a game changer, and if you don't leverage it, you're probably going to be falling behind. So there's a lot of different things that you have to look at.
Chip, do you want to jump in?
Yeah, the only things I'd add to that one is, I've now been at this for 35 years, and the hockey puck has never been moving faster in our landscape than it is right now and over the last couple of years. And I think we all know and believe that COVID was an incredible disruptor and accelerator. And I always take the lens of the customer. And that customer can be external and internal as well, but the customer expectation has increased exponentially over these last 5 and 10 years. And from a technology perspective, we need to meet that expectation in order to remain relevant. And so it's no longer from a community bank perspective that you can rely on that your definition of community is literally outside, say, our 4 walls and being at the local Rotary Club, et cetera. The idea of community is no longer that. It's a mindset or a larger community that might be small business, and it could be even across a wide span of geography, et cetera. So we have to meet those customer expectations and needs to remain relevant into the future.
That's well put, Chip. And I think even 10, 20 years from now, however the bank landscape looks. I think the banks that will stand out are the ones that are servicing very specific communities, whether they're, in their footprint or region or larger. So I love that comment about community. I wanted to talk more specifically because here we are, Patrick and myself are recruiters. We help connect the Pauls to the Chips, right? And it occurs to me that a lot of banks start out their process in their recruiting, and sometimes they're like, hey, let's do this ourselves. So I was kind of curious, like, obviously, Chip, you know me and you think the world of me. But but when did you make that decision of like, okay, this is a little bit too nuanced or outside of our wheelhouse? We need expertise. Tell me about that moment.
Well, let's go ahead and first just reiterate that I think the world of Brian Love, and there is no doubt that he is one of the best, most excellent recruiters who understand our business in the entire country. So there's the plug for you, Mr. Love. But really, we're understand. So I believe as exec management teams or as CEOs, you typically have a functional expertise that you grew up with and that your contact base is around. There aren't too many CEOs. Now it's beginning to change, but there aren't too many CEOs that grew up necessarily in the technology space and absolutely have a wonderful broad contact base for that. I don't. I also looked at it and said, we are a regional community bank, that our networks were going to essentially stay right within our region and not necessarily have the breadth or the depth necessary to recruit what I envisioned where we were going in the future, and absolutely to take us into the future into over 10 billion. And I firmly believe in this Midwest, upper Midwest, Rocky Mountain states, there's going to be a next $25 billion bank created. And so who could help us achieve that audacious aspirational goal? So that led us to, we can't do it ourselves. Which firm would be best suited to assist us with that?
Perfect. I hear it. It's very nuanced when you grow as quickly, and it's a very common thing to outgrow talent, right? That's one of the ties that binds with a lot of our clients around the country. That's something you said much earlier, but I also appreciate that the connection to the network that'll need to find these very specific candidates. That's something that Travillian can do. I guess, let me ask you this. Patrick, actually, I want to bring you in. So you were the primary recruiter. I think you and I worked pretty closely on this search. How did you, with the MidWestOne team, how did you kind of determine what the ideal CIO candidate was?
Great question, Brian. And in order to do so, I was fortunate that alongside Chip, we were able to connect with a lot of the executive team, a lot of the board members within MOFG to really capture their critical view on the role and how technology needed to weave into their strategy to accomplish their goals. So we have a pretty involved data intake when we're kicking off a search project where we get to spend significant time, review questionnaires, and really to a sense, interview the executives and board members and the stakeholders that really have a view of what's needed for the bank and capture their critical competencies, what they might be needing from their perspective. Technology affects, all different areas and departments of a bank. So we were able to capture that across the board from a lot of important, contacts within the bank to get their vision, and then kind of compile that into what we would consider, an ideal silhouette of what that candidate would look like. So in order to take maybe about 2 weeks to really capture all of that information from a couple of key players, that was a really important step in the process to understand, an overall vision of what was needed in that silhouette of the ideal CIO candidate. And then we're able to tailor that, compile that, and then, take that into the field to really identify, the best talent out there, which eventually led us to Paul.
Yeah. And I guess maybe another question for you, Chip, is, obviously the skill sets, and Paul will get to the skill sets and the experience, but competencies and culture are extraordinarily important when hiring a new candidate. I'm curious, Chip, at MidWestOne, how would you describe the competencies necessary for a good CIO or a good manager in general? And then what is the culture of your bank, if you had to define it?
That's a terrific question, Brian. And what I'd say is it's evolving. I spent a lot of time when I first joined the organization really working with our team and asking them, what is our culture? And it came back, and so we interviewed our top 75 leaders in the bank. And it came back and said our culture was one of family, kind, and caring, which are wonderful attributes and characteristics for an organization. However, we were a little light in innovation and learning, and we were a little bit light in a results orientation. So we've spent time in these last 2 years of evolving the culture to what we call our aspirational culture that has both of those two characteristics higher in our overall attributes. And the reason for that is essentially our relevance. We just celebrated our 90th anniversary. I look at myself as a steward of 90 years of history and of team members and families for the next 90 years. For us to achieve that, we needed to adapt faster and become more innovative and increase the results orientation while maintaining some of those legacy values and characteristics of a true community bank. So that's the culture that Paul began to assimilate into and that we were describing in the interview process. And then, what so attracted us to Paul was the deep functional expertise that Paul has, the breadth of experience, both community bank to almost regional community bank, most recently at Lakeland, but then also some of the background from Citi and Wells Fargo. So it's really almost that 1,000 foot to 30,000 foot of seeing how it's done at other organizations of where we wish to get to. He has already seen. And then, the last one that I'd say is what Paul impressed with me is the ability to really synthesize and simplify complexity. Because when we begin to speak about technology and how quickly it's moving, as well as some of the inner guts of this, you can get a little bit of deer in headlights when you're speaking to a board of directors or other exec team members or 800 team members across the bank, including universal bankers in the front lines. And Paul was able to simplify complexity and really get to the roots of how do you do your job and how can I make this better for you? And for our customers, essentially, what are your expectations? What are your needs? And how do we make it better for you? So all those pieces, Paul, just was able to do that all within kind of first interview formats. And then we were able to spend in-person time together, even further defining that. But then we also found out he'd be a wonderful cultural fit for us as an organization.
And Paul, I want to hear your take on why you thought they were a good fit. Before I do that, Patrick, just on being in the trenches and out there finding candidates for a search like this, can you tell us just a little bit more about the sourcing process that you undertook to find Paul?
I can. And I actually uniquely remember Paul. We go back a little bit now. I'm looking at Valley Forge National Park right now out of our office suite window. And I remember speaking to you for the first time, looking out at the park and thinking, oh, this is great to capture Paul. And, he's got a fantastic background and he's done some amazing things. And, how am I going to capture him and get a gentleman from New Jersey, that open him up to the concept of moving out to Iowa. And then to see that all come full circle and that you've joined the team and you're making such an impact, Paul, it's really, really cool to see that come full circle. But in terms of, how the sourcing initiated, from gathering and capturing what we believe to be, the true competencies and experiences from the MWO team, I kind of knew the level of candidate that I was seeking. And it was going to be, there are times where we might be seeking an emerging candidate for a position. There are times where we're seeking a more tenured and seasoned candidate. For this project and the weight behind how important, this strategic IT leader was going to be, I knew that it had to be somebody who would essentially, accomplish the mission of what MidWestOne wanted to achieve in growing and having the aspirations to hit that 10B and beyond mark. And, Paul had accomplished that. I think when you had joined Lakeland, Paul, it was somewhere, in a similar capacity of MidWestOne at around that 5 billion mark, so to say. And you helped grow that to, 11 billion plus and well positioned them, for the acquisition that they went through. That's exactly what we were trying to accomplish. Paul, he had all of the different aspects in his background of, not just the technical proficiencies, but, the strategic mindset, understanding the nuance around generative AI and digital transformation and data analytics and all of these, kind of key trendy buzzwords that are critical to what banks are trying to accomplish these days. The convergence of technology and banking, I always say this, it's not going away. It's only going to become more impactful, and that marriage is going to be that much more important. So recognizing that Paul had that within his background, along with some of the other items you mentioned, the vendor management skill set, just helping see and scale and grow a bank and also be able to lead a team and then communicate in layman's terms, to individuals that might not understand that tech speak at a high level. I found that Paul was able to embody all of that and, would just make an excellent presentation to Chip and his team. So I was very excited that we were able to team up and kind of understand what each other were looking for and make that introduction. And it really took sensing a lot of those background touch points and experience points to recognize what would make sense in terms of, a strategic candidate submission. And Paul really hit all of those marks, out of the park from an early stage. So I was thrilled that I was able to capture Paul, and he gave us the time and day to really expose not only ourselves, but what MidWestOne had to offer.
Good. And let's not forget, everybody, let's go movie land. 30 or 40 years ago, Field of Dreams, when shoeless Joe Jackson comes out of the cornfield and he's playing catch, and ultimately the other players go back into the cornfield and he's looking around at the lights. And he goes to Kevin Costner and says, "Oh my, am I in heaven?" And Kevin Costner answers, "No, you're in Iowa." So Paul, how could Paul say no?
Well, so let's go to the man here because, everyone's talking about you here, Paul, and what a great fit you were. And that's the big the big thing, right? You moved from Jersey to Iowa, right? From a recruiting perspective, that's a little bit of, that's a large ask. But I want to hear from you about why MidWestOne, why Iowa. Please, time's yours.
Yeah, so I was looking for the right fit, both people and opportunity. The opportunity is for both me and the company, right? Can I bring the company what they need to improve their situation? Do we have the same motivations and styles? Can I work with them? Can they work with me? Of the opportunities I was looking at, I really liked how I felt I could fit into this team. I felt that they had the right focus. Chip has definitely done a great job making sure that everyone's on the same page. And I felt that the culture was perfect for me. I knew that, I could make a difference and that I could feel comfortable that I had people that had my back. So
that's awesome. And I remember you did have some linkage to the Midwest. Previously, you were in Wisconsin, I believe, and Minnesota, if I'm not mistaken. So you're no stranger to cold winters, and New Jersey can get pretty cold too. So now that you've stepped into the role, Paul, what has your top priority been over the last year?
So I've been here all of 7 months, I think. So I basically started looking at the current state environment, what we do well, what needs improvement. That includes skill sets that we have and are missing. Then, based on the company strategy, identified a roadmap for identifying or improving functionality, services, and efficiency for both the customer and the employee. That included looking at our partners to make sure that we were getting and using what we needed. There's a lot going on here at MidWestOne, and with the the inclusion this year of the Denver office, geographically we're also kind of spread out a little bit as well. So there's opportunities here to improve how we leverage technology to improve the capabilities for collaboration and leveraging how we can improve the customer service, et cetera. So there's a lot of things that we're looking at. And there's a lot more that we have to do, but I think we're well on our way.
And Chip, maybe you want to chime in and talk about the last year and what you've been focusing on from a tech strategy and even from beyond. What would you like us to know?
Yeah, thanks, Brian. And I think, one of the things that made this search interesting as well is we are not necessarily what I would label a tech-forward bank, nor necessarily is our strategy to become a incredibly tech-forward institution. So our technology initiatives need to further propel our overall strategic plan and not stand on their own. Right? And there, over the last couple of years, and Paul mentioned Denver for us, we completed a geographic, what we called realignment. We divested Florida and then purchased in Denver as we scaled some of the operations there. We've really added, I think the number was probably about 50 individuals in our senior level positions over the last 2 years as well. Commercial banking and wealth management are growing at very positive rates as we redefine a little bit of who we are and where we can win, where we add the most value. And then in September, late September of 24, so just a few months ago, we completed a $125 million capital raise and then used the proceeds to do a very significant balance sheet or bond portfolio restructuring. And all of those led to a fourth quarter result where we have significantly increased our overall financial performance, our capital strength, and frankly, the relevance and viability of the organization moving forward. Now we're focused on how do we move from what I will call a peer average financial performer to, frankly, the top quartile. And that is where Paul and technology and all those initiatives really come into play now. And so, yeah, Paul is relatively humble in his comments for being with us only 7 months. Paul has been an absolute game changer. And that comes literally from his assessing the current state, which did not take very long based on his background and experience. We've already been able to add to our group DevOps. So we have brought on for the first time a couple of coders for ourselves. We have a business automation unit. And then we're already significantly we have 2 large significant tech projects in 2025 that we've greenlit that we're already in development or implementation on as well. They include ServiceNow in our back office. And then customer facing wise, we'll be heading to a new online digital platform for commercial banking in 25, consumer banking in 26. So we're moving pretty darn rapidly here. And Paul is completely aligning our technology roadmap with essentially our overall 3-year strategic plan. So it's come together very nicely for us, Brian.
Wow, Paul, you sound totally like a unicorn. So I'm going to give our first annual Unicorn of the Year placement to Paul Ho-Sing-Loy at MidWestOne. We may delete that last 10 seconds, but I figured why not try. So here's my final question for you guys. And we have a lot of people that watch these podcasts, that watch our videos, including my mom and my whole family, as you guys joked earlier. What advice would you give other financial institutions that are in a similar moment or considering some form of evolution? Like Chip, you mentioned adapting faster. What advice would you give them about their tech strategies?
I guess I'll start. First, I'd get the right people in place to do what needs to be done. Don't necessarily take the easy road. The challenges we face today will only get worse. So make sure you're prepared.
Yeah, and what I'd say is really good points, Paul. And then I'd say understand the investment that is necessary. Because for the right people and the right jobs, those individuals are going to desire to act. And those actions take investment. You can look at it as cost, but I look at it as truly investment into the organization. You have to be prepared for that. And then I also think you have to have the organizational alignment to move along at the same pace as that new leader in information technology, the new CIO is moving at it as well. And you say, when did we know we were ready for almost something new, something to propel us? And I really knew when our business units were clamoring for the what's next. So they were clamoring for more efficiencies. They were clamoring for more product. They were clamoring for more pieces that say other institutions are doing this. We need to become relevant. We're beginning to potentially lose or fall behind. So that your organization alignment has to be able to move at the same pace that your new CIO is.
That does speak volumes about your team, that they're the ones kind of, raising the concern of like, let's get more efficient here. Let's trim some of the fat. That's very impressive. And that's only going to get better now that you're actually aiding them in doing it. So really fantastic to hear. And we expect some fantastic things ahead for MidWestOne in the future. Any closing thoughts on your end? Anything else you'd like to put out there?
I'm good.
What I'd say, Brian, is one more time, Patrick, Brian, both of you did an excellent job in understanding who we were or in who we are as MidWestOne, where we were trying to get to, and refining and defining the search process for us and our culture. And then I would say your connectivity within the tech space is extremely high. And so we knew that going in. Ultimately, the slate of candidates that were delivered exceeded our expectations. And we're just incredibly fortunate to, one, have worked with yourselves, but then two, to have Paul as part of our executive leadership team. Incredibly optimistic and excited about where we're headed in the future.
Well, Chip, the words you say are so kind. You're making me blush. I honestly, we're humble here at Travillian, and we're just extremely proud to have clients like you. And it's fun to watch you grow, and it's fun to know that we help make a difference in the banks in a small way. So thank you so much, and I'll throw that love right back at you. Everyone we've dealt with at MidWestOne has been phenomenal to deal with. Some of the best bankers and genuine people that I think we've ever met. So this is just an overall love fest, which maybe should be the name of this podcast, since Brian Love is the host. Anyway, thank you so much for your time. I want to get you guys back to your day. Maybe we'll pop in a year from now and see how things are going with some of your initiatives and celebrate another Eagles Super Bowl victory. Thank you so much for watching,
we'll
everyone.
be successful. All right. See you.
Thank you.
See you guys.
Thank you, gentlemen.